I'd like to bring him up here, but I do want to say one more thing before I leave. That if you get a chance on this beautiful day, go down to the Waterman and Counts building. We're trying to move this wonderful facility down there, and we've got a campaign on to raise money to do that. So check it out. And Ray Robinson.
Thanks everyone for choosing to be here on this very lovely summer day. I thought that I would talk first about my experience during this show and jurying in general, and see what kinds of questions you might have about that. I'll talk a little bit about Bainbridge Island Museum of Art and what we are trying to accomplish there. We've been open just a little over a year. And then I thought I would open it up for questions about anything in the art world. I may not, there's no bad questions. Sometimes there's not a very solid answer, but we'll see where it goes. And just anything that you would like to discuss, I'm totally open to doing. In terms of during the show, this is a show that I've been following over the years, and I think it gets better and better. And what was very interesting for me was to look at a number of works by artists that I did not recognize, either the work or the artist. This was a blind jury process. And what that means is I see an image. Artists were able to submit, I think it was up to 3 slides, and I see an image of a piece, or 2 or 3, or if it's a 3-dimensional piece, I might see more than one image of it. So I'd see a side view and a front view. I don't necessarily know who the artists are. I would say that only about 15 or 10 to 15% I was able to recognize because I'm familiar with people. Richard Jesse Watson, who's here today, we just had a wonderful show of his at Bainbridge Island Museum of Art, and I happened to see this painting that is around the corner here at Simon Mace Gallery within the last couple of months, and commented that I thought it was a really strong painting. So there were a few pieces I had actually seen in person, but for the most part, I couldn't look at a painting and say, you know, I couldn't look at this painting and say, this abstract piece here is Jeannie Grisham, who I happen to know and who's also here. I just wouldn't necessarily have connected things that specifically. So it was interesting, and I think it shows that these kinds of exhibitions are important because people in positions like myself with newer organizations, or maybe looking to understand the diversity of the art out there and to meet new artists all the time, this is really another way that that's possible. And so it's kind of odd to be at your computer looking at, what was it, Jeanette? Where's Jeanette? Almost 400, 300?
315, something around there.
315 works of art were submitted for review. And so and you're able to access online with a password this account. So I could go back to it and save things and change things, and which was really nice. So over about, I would say, 2 or 3 days, I would review the website and start to play with how I would put together a show. I didn't see a theme because the work is so diverse, and as a curator, a lot of times you're looking for that possibility. I also didn't think that would be fair to the artist because you didn't know the show was about a theme. So here you ended up not fitting into a box that I constructed at the very last minute. What I preferred to do was to look at each piece of art and ask the question, and can everybody hear me okay? To ask the question, given what medium the artist is working in, do I react to this in a strong way? Do I feel like, I don't want to say is it a good painting or a good sculpture, but first of all, do I react to it? Does it take me somewhere? Is it something that I can't really ignore for one reason or another? And then the other is from a material point of view and a process point of view. do I think that there is some kind of a complicated, well-done process. I like materials and I like process. I used to be on the board of the American Craft Council years ago for 4 years and had the chance to go around the country when we had many, many meetings and watch new arts organizations open and see newer small museums and meet a lot of different artists and go to studios. And what has always intrigued me, and part of when I ran Craft Fine Arts Center in Seattle, was how artists work with materials and learn to use them. So I like things that are a little more complicated, the kind of one-line conceptual work that doesn't have a lot of work in it is much less interesting to me. And when you pick a juror, you do sign up with some baggage, for better or worse, and it's not like they interview you and try to screen out certain biases. But mine is, I like artists who have an idea, have something to say, but also throw themselves into their various media. So as you go around the room, I think you'll see that, and things that were maybe beautiful or interesting, but in a way more simply rendered, just didn't grab my attention quite the same way. Not to say that the artists who weren't selected or the pieces weren't selected all fit in that category, but that was sort of the lens I was looking at. This particular piece, I've never done something like this. I have done printmaking in the past and painting. My personal background is more in printmaking. I can only imagine looking at this that there's a variety of processes and layers here. I like the complexity. I like the layers of it. I think it looks really beautiful on this wall. By the way, this show is really well presented. The colors in the room and the lighting and just how things are laid out and the spacing. I think I want to congratulate you because it's really nice to walk into a space where you picked individual pieces of art and then you see how it really can come together as a show. So that this piece I found intriguing, and when I walked in, I was kind of excited to see it because again, you're only selecting from a slide. I would say that a lot of shows that are juried with these open processes tend to draw very heavily on two-dimensional art. You find a lot, as a juror, you find a lot of painting and printmaking and photography, and that was the case here. But I was also pleased that the advertising of the show obviously drew artists with various media like sculpture, metal sculpture, has some nice representation here. Jewelry, which is pretty wonderful to see. Again, being craft-oriented in my own personal history, I love the jewelry arts world. I don't know if everyone's aware that what I've heard is that the Seattle Metals Guild, which really spans a broad region here, is about the second largest guild of its kind in the nation. And I asked who was largest, and someone thought Washington, Baltimore, and I thought that was kind of cheating if they cast the net that wide. And that may not even be true, but the fact that we have so many jewelry artists working here, it's nice to see jewelry in a show and represented. Right behind you is this piece on the wall. Would you mind reading the title of the piece? I don't remember it exactly.
Woman with Child in Limbo.
I really enjoyed it in slide form and in person also. The idea that there's something about holding, and if you look behind, there's a little baby. You kind of have to get behind the piece to see it, which I don't remember seeing in the slide. I thought that piece was very intriguing just because it's a different use of space. And there is use of negative space, but it's more the line, and then you see this hand coming around. So that was a piece in the metals category, the sculpture category, that I found fresh. It's not something I've really seen before, and I enjoyed that. There's a very small painting, and again, if you wouldn't mind just reading, and maybe if you wouldn't mind reading the artist's name, I'll try not to pick on you over and over again, but
This one?
Yeah.
Friends Tonight in Oil by John Coquella.
If you will go up and look at that very closely, it's this meticulous, beautiful, beautiful, complicated painting, and it all takes place in this much space. And again, I can't really imagine doing that or how that's done, but I think that's also a very successful piece. This piece here, and if you don't mind, I'll just pick this up. Is that okay? This is, as I mentioned last night, I did pick this for one of the awards, for a special award. This particular, and the artist, is the artist here today? She was here last night from Whidbey Island. This is obviously, as I said last night, nothing I'll ever own or wear, or at least not out. And so, you know, as a juror, what do? You have personal tastes and preferences, and you're drawn to things, and we're all shoppers in our own way. So, you know, the first thing you do is you try to turn off that shopper switch. You know, I'm not out buying art. I'm not looking to collect or to buy a gift. I'm just really trying to understand something and maybe evaluate it on some level. And I like the composition of these pieces. I also obviously appreciated the detailed beadwork. What I didn't realize from the slide is when you get up close to these all have their own very complicated, different dichroic little worlds in here, and this is a piece that you want to get up to really close. I also appreciate how it's displayed here, because I've hung shows and seen a lot of shows where a lot of jewelry gets very formally mounted to a wall, and in some cases it can really work, like I think the figure, the pregnant, the sterling silver piece there, because you can play with the sense of hanging like this piece wants to do, and also shadow. But I liked how this was kind of on a curved form and how the light hits it. But I encourage everybody to go and see that. They're going to bring just a few pieces that I wanted to chat about also. Does anyone have any just random questions? Yeah.
Listening to you when you said the process of selecting these, do you feel now that you missed some pieces that should have been selected because you were limited to images on a screen that had no depth?
That's a good question, the answer to that is I don't know, because for two reasons. I won't know because I won't necessarily see those pieces in real life, and did everyone hear the question? Okay. And the other is I didn't go back. I think my password was good for so many days or whatever afterwards, and frankly, when you complete a process like this, and it's not like I did it sort of quickly, but when I fixed the selections, I just said to myself, I'm not going to torture myself and go back. Clearly, everybody here is a winner in my mind, and you should all be in your minds, because this work is selected. It doesn't mean, again, another juror might have come in and sliced the selections in a different way or was looking for a different thing. So a lot of it, you're the victims of sort of arbitrary criteria on some level, and you just hope that it's that there's enough of a focus or deliberate, sort of a lens that someone's looking through. Yeah.
Do you have any information besides the image? I mean, like the size or the media?
I was given the dimensions under each image. Is the dimension and what else? And well, the medium and dimension. So I was given that. Once in a while, you see a signature on a painting or something. I mean, you're not looking for it, but you register it, and it's like, that's so and so, or I don't know who that is. I'm not a big fan of the big, Kenneth, when the painting's this big. So to some degree that wouldn't have scored points, like knowing who it was doesn't necessarily work with me.
Greg,
Yeah.
I have a question that
Sure.
follows on
Yeah,
that.
and please, any
It
questions?
may already be answered. I presume then that the titles are not provided to you when you're looking at the
I
images.
think the titles were, the titles,
Ah.
the medium, and the dimensions. And that's a very interesting question because when I said the first thing I'm looking for is, do I react to it? You know, Susie's mother did to her down by the beach in 1974 or something. You know, and I didn't see that at all. And I don't know Susie. So, you know, what does that do for my selection? Titles can be very tricky.
I was wondering.
And I think, you know, untitled isn't a bad thing. If something, in my mind, I'm sort of editorializing, but it's related to, I think, how the work is selected. If there's a very deliberate, if a piece comes out of somewhere or something very specifically, I think titles are good, and the title will, to some degree, make sense, even if you can't connect to it. You sort of trust that it's reflecting something very specific. Sometimes titles, if they're very vague, you know, it's like kind of what's the point? You might just let the viewer, you know, see it for what they think it is. So how much you choose to explain something, I think, really should have to do with where the piece is coming from. Does that make sense?
It does, and I'm just wondering if that verbal explanation, when it's given, informs your visceral response to the work.
Either good or bad.
So,
Yeah.
Sometimes this one is this is a piece. Jan is from Bainbridge Island, and I'm not that familiar with her work. She's a printmaker on Bainbridge. She was here last night. Jan's, I don't think, is here. A lot of people who were here last night went home, and this is just, I think, a wonderful print. She told me last night, and I didn't know this, so it had nothing to do with the selection. One of her family members, in some estate, some attic, there were boxes of old family photographs, and she and other family members begun the process of trying to figure out who these people were. And of course, we all have those boxes and inherit things. And she regrets not really knowing who all these people are. But what I loved about this, and I think I said it last night, Ruthie, or Ruthie 2 as this is, it's a pretty pained photo, and I'm not sure if it's just the style of photography or in that period, you know, people were just kind of there and captured. There wasn't any say cheese or anything like that. It was almost the fashion to be this serious. So it's hard to say how much of that comes from that. But this little girl is pretty much in charge in my mind. I mean, she's kind of in her own little world, but she's pretty interesting. And there's another one of child falling or boy falling on a little tricycle, I think it is, and falling this way, but really looking that way. And it's an interesting piece. And there was another one that I didn't jury in that I liked also quite a bit, and it was a baby in a bathtub. Again, sort of a twisted little baby in a vintage bathtub. But this, there's a real beauty here. I mean, it's not intended to be a pretty picture, but I think it's just really beautifully done. So, thanks. Did I answer your question about titles? Does anyone else have another question or follow-up comment about titles? Or Jeanette, could you bring the Martha Pfanschmidt, just one of the pieces?
I think it's right here on the bench.
Oh, she did bring it. Thank you. Speaking of titles, this was one that and I tried to avoid looking at the titles, and maybe that's why I even hesitated were titles offered to me, and then I remember they were. Because I was looking for things that impacted me visually somehow. This piece actually hangs this way. And this is a complicated process. For a small, pretty, if you will, piece, this fused glass process with various layers and some kind of etching, acid etching or something. I don't think it's sandblasted. But this piece it is titled Tide Pools, and there are two of them. It's a diptych that hang together. I love this piece, and I thought of atmosphere or nature or something, water, when I saw it, and that was the reaction I had. And then for me, the title Tide Pools in this case was reinforcing. Not that I needed that to pick the piece, I think I already had, but it was kind of reinforcing to me. And not in the sense like, oh yeah, I'm right, but just that it resonated so well. So that's where, for me, a title worked, I guess. Some of the other pieces, I could talk about every piece because I picked it. And the awards thing is kind of complicated also because, again, it's a gut reaction. It's the ability to see things in person. You sometimes react to things a little differently. Clearly, I have an interest in rewarding diversity of medium and expression. So the awards didn't all go to painters or photographers, and I did try to mix things up a little bit. But Ulrich Packer is here with his wife Pamela, and he is the best of show artist. It's the metal piece on the pedestal. And Rich, would you mind just saying a few words about it?
Okay, I'm gonna try.
Okay.
Oh, well. Should I?
I'd love it if you did. And full disclosure here, I've actually known Rich for probably 20 years. He was one of the artists I met at Pratt Fine Arts Center years ago when I took the job as director. I would not have recognized this piece. I didn't know whose piece it was. If you see the slide that's on the website, this piece is on a stand and it's turned at an angle. And as a slide, it doesn't register in such a complicated way as I think it does in person, especially as you walk around the whole piece. So this was an example, again, the idea that I like things that are process-oriented and wanting to include diverse art. I had no idea, in my mind, that this was as beautiful and handsome a piece until I came in person. And you don't, this is a pitfall with slides. And often with things that have sheen, whether it's glass or metal, or things that are like Martha's piece or encaustic paintings, where you don't see the depth or the translucency. There are probably 5 or 6 categories of art that I don't think show up as well in slides, or that you have a harder time photographing. I don't know if you want to pick it up or...
Yeah, I can do it, sure. Yeah. So basically, I look at it, this is all fabricated sheet, welded. The medium, this is 14 gauge stainless steel, and these are 3/16 rods. It's all individual rods that are welded next to one another to the edge, and then the edge is finished in, and then it becomes kind of mysterious as to what exactly is happening, what exactly is the surface. It's not always obvious to everyone. And I started doing these rod surfaces because I was trying to create surfaces that a piece of sheet metal would not conform to an edge like this because of these twisted undulations. If you follow what I'm, due to the fact that this piece of metal would be way longer along these edges than down the center, and so it would pucker. It would just not bend this way. It's a compound curvature. Here, and here.
But each one that you line up individually.
Each one, and it's kind of a process of where I have a bunch of rods that are this long, literally, and I tack one side, lay it against the next one, tack this side, and take a cut-off wheel and cut it off. But I usually do about 6 rods at a time. And then I move them down the line, and they get shorter, and then I've got another stack of rods. But of course, they're counting 10-foot lengths, so I'm not going to work with a 10-foot rod. So I 3 cuts and 2 full sections and just use them up. So it's a moderately labor-intensive process.
There are a couple of other metal pieces that intrigued me a lot. This particular one, And it's, I don't know if Kim is here. This is your piece? Do you want to talk about this? I don't mean to put you on the spot, but do you?
Not really.
Well, then I will, and then you may suffer from that. This piece, in a more simplified kind of way, also conceptual. It has a movement to it as you walk around, and on the one hand, it looks like this very kind of structured, staid thing, and it's, kind of bulky and awkward, and yet there's a lightness to it as well. And if you have a chance to move around it, and then also the fin form here, whether it's a shark fin or ode to submarines or whatever it is, I found that fun. Also, I like that piece. Speaking, you mentioned paintings that elicit or say something specific. Here's one, and it's not a painting. I think this is a pastel. It's an oil painting. I'm sorry. But this is sort of a trick to the eye because it's on this paper that's torn, and it looks very much like a drawing, and it's labeled as an oil. I thought on the slide it was a pastel, probably, and it's not. I remember being a little kid playing baseball out in the baseball field and sort of kind of looking away, or boys are sort of dumb, really, I think, especially growing up. But a lot of kids, baseball was slow, and you just see faces kind of wandering. At first glance, that reminded me of that. And then you pull yourself away, and it's not a baseball game. And then there's all of this space here that it really has nothing in it, and probably contains most of the story. And I think of all the pieces, this to me was intriguing because I don't know what it's really about. It's called The Long Stare. And there, I close my eyes, I look at the slide on the computer, and it's sort of like something maybe kind of awful or unexpected has happened, and you close your eyes again, you look, and it's like he really can't believe that she left him and she's going to stay on, or whatever. There's something. It's not necessarily, in my mind, and this is all what you project. It's not necessarily that he's looking at anything in particular. It's this just very lost, lonely place or point, and I think we would all see things very different. What I said last night was what I love about this is how much is happening in just very few inches of this much larger piece, and then probably how much there is about this that you'll never really know. This is Alana Winsberg from Shoreline, who I do not know.
She's here.
Are you here? Could you speak, now that you've heard that, could you speak about it?
Yeah, I don't want to get into too much specific detail, but because it's really interesting to
You get
hear
out of the way of your piece.
your first reaction and then your second reaction.
Yeah.
And so it's related to something specific. However, it was something that came out of an emotion. I didn't even pre-think it. It was a really fast painting for me. Usually it takes me weeks, months, whatever. But it came out of a specific event and emotion, and it's more to do with the second than the first. Yeah, so I hesitate to get specific about it.
I love how sketchy, I love what a sense of drawing it is. And, I think of painting as, I don't know, I mean, we all observe so much, but there's such a sketchiness about it. I was surprised to see its oil. Which is very nicely done.
Thank you.
Does anyone have a reaction to that they want to share? Okay.
Well, I was struck by the fact that, the first thing a person would say, it's a long stare, why don't we see where it's staring? And it's just so much more interesting to have it on the back. It's not what you usually see. So right away, it tells you the artist has chosen this for a particular reason. That's not just a mistake. It's obviously on purpose. So then it gives it, to me, a lot more strength.
The other part was cutting him in half.
Yeah.
That was like...
Because you can't draw hands and feet?
No.
That's what I always did.
Cutting off of so many things and the bleakness and the loneliness and the, all that stuff was coming up for me.
Well, what I appreciate about that piece is that whether you know that or not, you can create your own story. It takes you somewhere. You're gone way outside the frame in looking at the piece, and I appreciate that.
And I thought too that the negative space, all that space behind him is brilliant because he is so deeply alone with whatever it is. And I had a profound sense of loss and a kind of collapse or something also about the way the body is painted at this moment of collapse and implosion a bit. I thought, I fucked up again, or that's it, we lost the game.
Well,
but he's alone with it, it's beautifully done.
Is the artist here who did this painting here, Julie Devine? I just wanted to say that I've never worked in palette knife painting, and it's been very popular on and off. I really liked that piece, and I felt that there was a real sense of lightness and airiness about it. It was one of those in a slide that I was hoping that could be the case, but I wasn't really sure. Colors are tricky because I'm looking at a slide, or I'm looking at a digital image that is on a computer that is, when you take a photo, it's removed from the real piece. And then I'm looking at it on my computer monitor, most of the time in my office at the art museum under these fluorescent lights. So it's another step or two removed. I was telling Susan Ogilvy, and her painting is right here on the wall, and I think I'm going to just grab this if this is okay, because it's hard for some of you to see. Susan was here. I don't see Susan here today. And this is, I did not know whose piece this was on the slide. It is signed, but I honestly, I tried to avoid signatures, and I wouldn't necessarily have recognized this as Susan's, although her paintings and pastels are really beautiful. And she lives in Port Townsend, doesn't she? But what I told her was when I saw this, and I didn't see it framed, I only saw imagine the frame isn't here. That's really what I see with darkness around that. But what I liked about it was that it was almost like a window through where you had opened a gate. You had just come through one place into another, and you discover this. And I also really enjoyed the use of color, and I was hoping that actually the stones would be this purple and the red would be that red. And this was one of those that the color in it intrigued me, and that's part of why I picked it. The composition is really nice and interesting and vertical. I think that's unusual for paintings to be this vertical. But I think it was the use of colors that I found kind of fresh, and those are really not my colors. I mean, if I were to go shopping, these are sometimes the colors that make my teeth hurt a little bit, the purples and the pinks and those kinds of things. But I wasn't shopping. I was jurying, and I just thought that the beautiful use. I mean, this whiteness, the creamness of the tower, and how she's blended, and how all the colors work so well together. So I really enjoyed this piece. Also, are there any other questions, or do people want to make comments about the show? Again, I want to note how I think beautifully hung the whole thing is, and I wish the very best for Northwind's Art Center with their new space, and you truly deserve it after all these years. And I think your campaign should get all the support it needs. But I think you've done great things with this space too, and I think obviously it's been a wonderful incubator, and I've seen several great shows here over the years, and I think in a more constrained site, you've been very successful. So I can only imagine what you'll do in the next iteration.